out of control. Bonela Executive Director Ms. Cindy Kelemi joins this conversation. A very good afternoon and thank you so much, Ms. Kelemi, for joining us.
Afternoon and thanks for having me.
Let's just kickstart our conversation maybe by understanding, as according to your own research, how is the state of gender-based violence in our country?
Thank you very much for the question. I think our invitation here is sparked by the press release that we sent out 2 days ago.
Of course.
And we were basically, as an organization, expressing our displeasure in how the gender-based violence response is being managed. And for that, we were calling for political will, because we know that everything starts and ends with political leadership. Therefore, it's important for them to provide guidance as to how we can respond to this epidemic. Now, coming to your question, there have been quite a number of assessments that were done, which indicated that gender-based violence is skyrocketing. But we also need to acknowledge that the numbers that we have are the official numbers, but the bulk of the numbers are not reported. We are saying this because we work on the ground, and we have so many people who come to us experiencing gender-based violence, but they are unable to proceed to accessing justice because either the perpetrator, they are related in one way or the other, or the perpetrator is the provider within the home. So there are so many issues that bar people from really accessing justice. So the numbers that we are looking at are just a tip of the iceberg.
Right, right. You mentioned there that some of the reasons why we find that victims of gender-based violence do not receive the justice that they deserve is because we find that some of these people that violate them are people that are providers at home. This just, in my opinion, just draws back to the point that you did raise at the beginning of our conversation, that political will is very, very vital and pivotal in, changing the state of gender-based violence in our country. Because this just goes to indicate that there's a certain demographic that is not empowered enough. When you find yourself in a state where you stay within abusive situation or environment because this person provides for you.
Yes.
Let's speak on empowerment.
Thank you.
As a form of, as a way, perhaps, of trying to curb this cloud that has befallen us of gender-based violence.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe before I get to your question, I want to state categorically clear that our demand is not misplaced, in that the state is the one that is responsible for protecting people's rights. And when we are talking about gender-based violence, it is a rights issue. It's about violation of human rights. Therefore, it needs to be regarded as such. Therefore, the state has a greater responsibility of protecting people's rights. And why are we agitating and saying that the state must take greater responsibility? We are looking at the overall response to gender-based violence. In our view, it is fragmented. It's not coordinated. The resources are not enough to enable us to achieve what we are trying to achieve. In essence, we don't have a national program. So we would have thought that the new government will start there, to say, how do we build a program that will effectively address gender-based violence on a national scale? Also considering that we are in a situation where the numbers are pointing to us that this is a crisis. And therefore, a crisis, the response ought to be different. It cannot be business as usual. Hence our statement to say the government needs to step up and ensure that people are protected. But most importantly, we need a strong response. How do we know that this response is not strong? We have had many pandemics, right? We have had COVID. We have had HIV and AIDS. everybody in the country knows that at some point, or even up to now, HIV was prioritized as the most important issue that we need to deal with as a country holistically. And secondly, we had COVID. The investment that went into addressing COVID showed that political will, and that is what we are asking for. Because when there is, for instance, if we're to declare a state of emergency as an example, it basically means that the entire government infrastructure has to be involved with all the resources. Because currently the battle is only lies with the Department of Gender. Mind you, we are saying department. So it basically means that every ministry, every civil society organization, every church, every individual ought to make it their business to respond to gender-based violence. As far as I'm concerned, I expect that every establishment by now should have a gender-based violence focal person, so that we begin to invest in prevention. Because yes, we are currently looking at the numbers when it has already happened, but the idea is to prevent these issues from happening. Why are they happening?
I think, Kelemi, that actually answers the question of why have there been many campaigns on, gender-based violence. A lot has been said regarding gender-based violence. But the actual work and investment into curbing this pandemic, that's where the problem lies. And that is why we continue to see it on the rise.
Absolutely. We all come together and speak about gender-based violence when it's the launch of the 16 days against gender-based violence. And then thereafter, what follows?
Right.
Not so much. But the numbers, as we see, especially of women and children who are dying at the hands of gender-based violence, it should cause us to act. And that is what we are calling for as an organization, that we need action and not words. We have done enough talking. We have done enough speculation. For us as an organization, we find it absurd that even at this point, if you were to ask, what are the actual numbers of victims of gender-based violence, we don't have that coordinated framework or monitoring and evaluation framework that enables us to have that data. If you asked in the first quarter of 2020 or in the last quarter of 2023, for the cases that were reported, what caused such conflicts, whether it's within relationships or whatever the case may be, we don't have that data. So we also need to invest not only in collecting, collating, and ensuring that we package the data so that it can inform our policies and programs, but also ensuring that we have enough data to inform our research priority areas. And we also need to invest in research. We have, for instance, we talk about perpetrators, but to what extent have we engaged perpetrators?
Right.
Why did you do what you did? What went wrong? So that we go to the root of this problem. So currently we are just, working on the surface, and I don't think it's enough. It's not enough at all.
The point that you're raising right there, where now you have to involve the perpetrator and actually get to the root cause of, what caused the reaction or the actions to violate somebody else. We had, not so long ago, we did have the Commissioner of Prisons and Rehabilitation. They were talking about how they are about to infuse a program where they will be now having sit-downs with the perpetrator and the family members as well, and trying to get to the bottom of why did you act in such a manner? Right. Is that one way or one program that you believe could be fruitful in terms of, reducing the numbers that we continue to see skyrocketing of GBV? Absolutely.
But beyond that, we agree with the President that Botswana has become a violent society. And we also agree with him that this violence is institutionalized. We socialize our children into violence. And how do we do that? Corporal punishment is an example. Capital punishment is an example. So we have children. When you look at the statistics, the people who were interviewed, who were perpetrators, 30% or so were saying that they experience violence as children. So it means we are creating a cycle, and it has come to a point where we are unable to break that cycle.
Right.
And that is what is happening. So how do we better socialize our children to understand that you can solve a conflict through dialogue? That you don't always have to be in the default position of wanting to hurt someone,
Right.
whether it's emotionally or physically or financially. There are better methods in which you can engage, which do not necessarily result in harm. That's where we need to start.
Right,
Yes.
right. I'd like for us to go into talking about our culture, how it has been set up in terms of how we relate with men and how we relate with women,
Yeah.
and how they are brought up. Quite two different ways that they're brought up. And some believe that it is our culture that in some way or some form, influences this, because we find that most men are conditioned to believe that they cannot voice out their grievances if they're not happy about something, which in turn they bottle up all of those feelings and then they snap at one point and they violate the next person. What can we say about that, and how is it that we can go about, changing that culture of monna ga lele, monna ga bui mathata a gagwe, into, in such a way that will align with our evolving society?
Absolutely, and that's a really, really, really important question. In that you find that we are people that pride ourselves in culture. But culture is supposed to be dynamic. And we know that one of the causes of gender-based violence is inequality.
Right.
How we view men and their roles, and how we view women and their roles. We know that in the home, how tsena wa botsa gore bana ba tsogile jang, and bana, you are including the wife or the female partner.
Right.
So in many ways, you are basically putting that woman in a position where they are not an equal to their partner. So even your approach in engaging them, you engage them as such that they are inferior to you. So when we talk about gender equality, we ought to be looking at our cultural practices and how they perpetuate gender inequality, which in the end results in gender-based violence. We also need to, in the same vein, orientate and socialize our children, especially the boy children, better, in understanding that it's okay to be vulnerable.
Right.
It's okay to say I'm hurt. It shouldn't be a masculine issue. You are human, and therefore you are bound to feel things the same way that any other human being would feel. The only difference is the response. So we need to orientate them and socialize them better in terms of responding to conflict, responding to pressure, because sometimes it's pressure, right? We still have an expectation as a society that the boy child or the man should be the provider. But look at our economic situation. It tells us a different story.
It does.
In fact, you find that in some instances, more women are empowered economically than their male counterparts. How do we deal with those issues?
Right.
From a gender equality point of view, and also coming from a culture that says mosadi ke ngwana. Yeah.
Right. Well, we've run out of time. That is all the time that we did have. But thank you so much, Ms. Cindy, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. And let me take this time to congratulate BTV. I saw your campaign that you are running. It's really, really impressive. And we hope that other media houses will also follow suit. So thank you for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much. Well, there we have it. That was Executive Director Ms. Cindy Kelemi from Bonela. And we're on the topic of GBV as it stands in this country, Botswana. It's quite alarming how the statistics keep skyrocketing despite there being campaigns. But we've just learned that it's credited to lack of frameworks that can be executed on the ground to curb this pandemic. Stay tuned for the news at the top of the hour.
I'm delighted to be here with you, to learn from you, to be